So Marina sent you, well, we talked the last formal meeting we had on Saturday earlier this month, which we talked about infrastructure. Maureen also talked that we, as a city, were going to be doing some polling because of some time considerations that were coming up. And so we're going to get those polling results as of yesterday late night. And we wanted to schedule this meeting because of some potential time considerations to potentially make some recommendations to the city council before they got those results. So we got these results last night. As I said, I was looking through them while I was listening to the meeting that was in here last night. I was hiding in the back. And so we're giving you kind of just a lot of the raw data as well as some of the information that we just got today on some calls earlier today. So you're on the very front line of the polling results that we're going to talk about. And so the intent of what we're going to try and do today is we're going to provide some quick updates and just quick background on some of the things we've talked about before, really quick, and then we're going to jump into the polling and give you some of the background and the basic results of what we got back, what we've done for the last 2 weeks, and then let you guys have a discussion on kind of next steps and thoughts for the group and thoughts in general on the conversation, and then we'll talk about the next meetings that we have for Engage as well as potential future council meetings. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Keep rolling? Yep. Okay, so I just put this up there. I'm not going to go through this, but so when we're talking about our general fund discretionary revenues, we've talked about that a lot as one of the big issues we've had, and that's really tied to what this group has talked about, what we've discussed, and that's what we're doing. Basically, the polling for is revenue that would support the general fund in one of the areas. And we talked about those are the big areas. The general fund, we've talked about economic development, we talked about recreation and community services as well as infrastructure and maintenance at our last meeting. We've talked about fire and PD from the big picture. That's a future meeting that we're going to go into detail on both those, but that's what make up the general fund. We shared this when we did the first budget presentation. This is the general fund unfunded needs that we have there that we don't have, that we've itemized between infrastructure, police, and fire. That's at $7 million we talked about. And then I just want to
question on that last slide. Those are one-time expenses?
No, that's annual.
Annual, so that's the issue we're
talking about.
Right.
To say, remember as we go through there, police, that's the police master plan and basically another shift of police officers as well as some other things. The fire number is basically our third fire station, operating it, not building it. The building maintenance, pavement rehab, street maintenance, those things are annual costs that we either are unfunded or our needs were not being met for all those infrastructure pieces. So they're every year. That 2.3 is specifically the pavement rehab we talked about at the last meeting that we should be doing every year to keep our roads maintained.
Chris, you have a question? Yes,
yeah.
Just a quick question, because as we grow, okay, we're projected to grow this much, this much, this much. What is the percentage that impacts that for projection increase?
So we do some assumptions on that in the budget, but we haven't broke that down. That's our need right now, and for the future, look ahead for the city in our forecast, potentially our 10-year forecast. It's a little difficult because they don't always work evenly, because new growth of 300 units that comes in an apartment complex isn't going to affect the road infrastructure. They might wear it out, but you're not creating more pavement per se. Yeah.
On the police and fire, is it roughly correlated with number of residents, or is even that different depending on the kind of?
It's different in police and fire. We'll talk specifically when you get into those, but you're right, it's different on the zoning, and even for fire, the need for the third station, it doesn't jump with one new resident or two new residents. It jumps at an interval for the coverage ratios to get to all the places.
And an increase in your insurance rates.
Right. So it jumps like this, and we've already hit that jump. So our thought is when we can get to that level, that's going to help us.
I guess then we'll get to the poll, but did you poll on the fire district?
No, we're going to tell you what we pulled on. We did not pull on the fire district, but we have some data that might be useful in thinking about that. So, yeah, any other questions there? So the next one I was going to hit you with is not the general fund revenue, but it's something that typically would fall into the general fund discretionary expenses, but we've done it a different way, and we've used money that's come through our residential development control system to fund the things they have on that big list up there. But as we talked about earlier this month, there was legislation, SB 330, that would basically eliminate RDCS, and the governor signed that, I think, with either 16 or 18 housing bills at once. So growth control on Morgan Hill, our voter-approved growth control, we won't be using RDCS likely after January 1. We won't be. So it's going to be a lot different. And that's going to change how housing and things happen, which is our next conversation for Engage later this month on what happens with housing. But from the infrastructure perspective, we've been using money we've gotten for those contributions to do this maintenance on an annual level. So we talked about that $7 million of unfunded need. This is $1 million, $1.1 million of funding we've had that just disappeared.
This item has
Yeah. So, right. So I just wanted to do that. And then also not on here that we talked about last time, we actually get more than 1.1 because we do capital projects from it too, not just this stuff, like one-time capital projects for pedestrian safety, safe routes to school stuff. And those are ongoing projects, so that's an additional hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that isn't going to be used anymore.
So there's haven't been impact fees, those have been kind of optional.
Some are impact fees and some are the RDCS fees, but like
Impact fees stay, sort of.
yes, impact fees stay. And we've done some things we talked about. We just switched we're just in the process of switching our park dedication fee, but almost all the time, impact fees are to build something, make something bigger or expand, to build a new road like Hale Avenue, to put maybe a signal in when the intersection reaches capacity, but they're not there to say, hey, let's add some bike lanes on this existing road, or let's fix this area of existing city where we need a sidewalk, or repair sidewalks like this stuff. So all those kind of discretionary CIP projects we used to be able to do, those are the ones that go away. So the council will lose the ability to say, hey, let's do this project to improve this specific area, because it's going to be tied only to impact fees and what is in our plan for those impact fees. So it's really only tied to growing new stuff. And when this goes away, we lost RDA, which helped us with our CIP for a long time. When this goes away, we don't have anything but the general fund to rely on for these type of projects. And the general fund, as you remember, is impacted already. So then it's impacting our CIP as well, for at least the next 5 years. And we say 5 years because that's what SB 330 says, but there's a good chance that it won't allow us, that we won't be allowed to bring it back in the same form anyways.
If the state's government, they think it's a success in 4 or 5 years, they'll keep it.
Right. And there's other laws that actually impact, not just besides SB 330, that like these extra fees, even if SB 330 weren't there, we're going to be scrutinized based on other housing laws because you're delaying or stopping development. So even without 330, it was going to be tougher, but 330 made it real easy because it's not able to do it. So jumping to the polling, so we've all understood the why. Several members of the group said, hey, we're interested in jumping right into talking about polling. Other members of this group said, hey, no, we need to understand the detail of the city budget. So we're still committed to doing that. We just kind of ran into a time crunch. So and the time crunch really focuses around the upcoming elections. So we have 2 elections coming up, or regular elections. The March primary, and the March primary, in a primary election, typically you can only do a special tax for a specific, so if you want to do a special tax for public safety, you put it on the ballot, but you have to get 2/3 for that to be approved. A general tax only takes 50%, but that has to typically go on the general election.
Then why does it say special tax majority?
Oh, that's a typo.
Okay.
Michelle, you didn't catch that for me.
I didn't, I missed it.
We were working on the presentation all day today. We had a pretty short time. So I will fix that, if everyone can cross that out on the paper. But, so everyone cross that out on the paper, and I'll fix it for what goes out to everyone else, but that is special tax, sorry, John, you're exactly
So
right.
March 2020 special tax should be 2/3.
Yeah, 2/3 only typically. We're gonna talk about later on, but I won't wait until the end, we're gonna talk about when that might not be a requirement, but it is a special tax, 2/3 requirement.
So you didn't consider a bond?
We haven't considered a bond anyways, because most of our need is an ongoing annual basis, not bonding for a big amount of money, like to build projects. We've talked about before bonding for the pavement project, but we don't think that's a good idea, because if we tear up the whole town to do a $20 million pavement project, we can't handle it, we can't handle the management of it, and the town can't handle having it happen all the time. Yeah, so there's not a need for a bond because we're not doing a capital expense, it's an ongoing operational expense. What we will talk about is a property tax, a form of a property tax is what we looked at, which that's what a bond usually supports the bond, because the bond property tax pays it back. But so why are we pulling now? So the reason we're pulling now, and we kind of pulled it out, everyone, and so we were not pulled it out, but said, hey, we want to go forward with this, is there was some discussion with the council, and for certain things to happen, certain types of taxes or measures to get on the ballot for March of 2020, we would have to have some council action on October 23rd. And that's why we moved it forward quickly and brought this meeting forward. Maureen's email said, hey, we're doing something on October 23rd. We're actually not recommending doing that anymore because of the results of the polling, and we'll get into the detail on that. So instead, we're looking at the first meeting in November, which will be November 6th, because we'll talk through that. But that was really why we did the polling now. It doesn't mean that we're not, as the city and this group may choose to say, hey, we don't think it's a good idea to do March, go for November, and we want to get through this whole process. We want to have a chance to talk it through. We're still going to do the dive into the city's budget, and then we just look for November. That may be what you want to do, but we wanted to provide the opportunity to say, if it makes sense to do something in March, we have the ability to do that. So we kind of moved quickly on that, and we could move quickly, take some actions in October, and still the council could make the ultimate decision to put something on the ballot in March or not in December. But we have to take some actions to get to that point. So that's why we're doing it now. So just to talk about the poll that we did, so just the kind of methodology and the background as you look at it. What we're looking at, and this is your voters typically in Morgan Hill, or the people you're going to sample. So November 2020, just under 20,000 people, and March 2020, just under 15,000 people. So that kind of maybe demographic on who's going to vote in each election and what's going to happen in each election is part of the reason why we wanted to move forward and say, at least let's consider thinking about March. As you can see, much fewer people are expected to vote in March than in November. So the sample that was taken and was 557 likely November voters, 442 likely March voters. So it shows you the breakdown of how the polling was done, and we used Godby Research, which is recognized polling firm, polls for stuff all over the place, does a good job, and did the combination of the calls, and then it ended up with the margin of error for November of just a little over 4% and a little bit higher for March of just under 4.6%. So that's the margin of error, which is important as you look at the stats as we go through, because that can be the margin of error on any of those things. So if one is 48% and the other is 46%, they're essentially the same result as you look at it. And the interviews were conducted over the last couple of weeks. They just finished them up on the 13th, so hot off the press. So the two things we surveyed, and we really wanted to look at the things that were potential options. There's obviously more options, but there's there's limited options to get to that big, you know, infrastructure, public safety revenue gap or funding gap. There's not that many. We did, 2 years ago, we did the TOT and increased 1% TOT, which got us $270,000. So you can see even if we increased 3% TOT, which would put us really high, it would get us to just less than $1 million. So we looked at two things. The first was a 1/4 sales tax. And why would we look at a 1/4 sales tax?
Because that's all we can ask for.
That's all we can ask for without the legislature giving us approval. That's all we can ask for. That's what's left in our county to move us up, right? Because that's the gap. A couple years ago, we asked for 75 cents. We pulled for 75 cents, right? Former Mayor Tate. But at that time, what hadn't happened? The Measure B sales tax, right? So that sales tax jumped on, and that limits our what we can do without the state legislature saying you can go higher than your 9.25 in the county. So there's a couple of cities that already have the 25-cent additional sales tax. I know it's Campbell, and I believe San Jose. So that's what gives us the gap that no one else, another regional measure can't really steal that 25 cents because of other cities have kind of blocked it out for us. So we pulled on that, and that would generate $2.5 million annually. And then we pulled on what's called a community facilities district, which is really a property tax, a parcel tax. So, but what we did, we figured we've never done well polling for property taxes as a city, and traditionally cities don't poll well, but a couple of cities have been, for property tax, but a couple of cities have been innovative, or call it innovative or call it what you want, but they've thought about it where you have a community that really is not big on growth and not big on new people coming in, and you do your Prop 13 thing and you tax the new people more than the existing people. So we set up the polling to say, hey, would you support a basic parcel tax for the CFT of $75 a year for existing residents and $500 a year for new residents, people who come here after the election. And it would also, it doesn't say it in the questions that we asked, but it would change on change of ownership. You would shift from the 75 to the 500. So it would generate initially 1.4 million in the first year, but that would, every year that houses would shift to new owners, that would increase significantly and get us to a much higher amount. So that was one of the ways we identified that could get us to a higher level and potentially be more acceptable to people who were already living here. Same story as a property.
My question, does that shift in residents, is that the individuals coming outside of Morganhill in buying a house, or is that?
Shifting houses inside. Yeah. There could be some provisions, change of ownership, just like Prop 13 for family members, that sort of thing. And that could be written in, but yeah.
It says residences, does that mean non-residential properties or not?
No, it'd just be a little different. So we didn't get into that, but it would be a little different. It would be by the square foot, but we didn't get into the details on that for the polling because the polling has to be really specific on the number of letters you can use and the questions you can ask, because you're very well aware.
Yeah, and then what would you be allowed to use this on the city?
So what we pulled for, and we'll show you, is it's for, well, you'll see the questions, but it's public safety and potholes. Public safety and potholes.
So it's directed funding.
It is, because we would plan on March, which would be a special election, and we have to say what we're using it for.
So it says facility, but you're allowed to use the property.
That's just the form of the tax that we use.
Make sure we're clear though, there's truly designated funds for specific purposes that are part of this department. So whether it's 3 areas, 4 areas, or 2 areas, it becomes designated for those categories.
Exactly. And you could make it, you can make it for everything the city does in the general fund, but it's still going to require typically a 2/3 approval because it's going in March versus the majority. So does that make sense? And so that's what we went with. We kept it simple, so it's a sales tax and a property tax. We figured the way we wrote the property tax would hold better than just a typical parcel tax of $200 per person, which we didn't think would work well. So, so this is the exact question, and you have it in your pamphlet for the Community Facilities District CFD property tax. So to preserve essential city services, including 911 emergency response times, neighborhood police patrols, fixing potholes, fire prevention and protection services, shall Morgan Hills measure creating an essential services levy with an annual rate of $75 per existing residence and $500 per newly purchased residence, with alternative rates for non-residential, see voter guide. That's what we have to use the language there. Providing $1.6 million annually until repealed by voters with annual inflation adjustments, independence and oversight, and no funds for Sacramento be adopted. All the language like that is what the professional polling companies give us to say this is what works to help you. No Sacramento, it's just a standard in everything.
What about Fresno?
Yeah, I get, yeah. So this is really what people are answering, and it was drawn up to specifically say, hey, will you support this? And it's even written in a way to say, hey, we'd be charging new people more than existing people, so it's at least as understandable as possible.
The 75 and 500 numbers are just, we already come with number 75 and 500.
They would get us to that $7 million, which we've identified earlier eventually. So that's what was our starting point. And there were some tiers on if you charge less, will it change the percentage? And I haven't included those because it doesn't change the results at all. So I'm just going to get to the results real quick. Where there's 3 sets of results. So as the polling company goes down, they ask the question 3 different times during the conversation. The first one they ask at the beginning, and that's called the uninformed testing. So this is before they know anything, and they just hear the ballot measure. Then they go through a bunch of stuff and say, hey, did you know this is going to help police services and reduce, the time for a fire department to get to you, and it's going to help us fix potholes. And I'm going to jump back and forth. We're going to get to what's called an interim ballot test, and that's after they've heard all the good stuff, so the percentages tend to go up. And then they talk about, well, did you hear, this is going to put us at the highest sales tax rate in the county, and the city's growing, if they stop growth, you wouldn't need these new taxes. They hear all the bad stuff. And then they get what's called the informed ballot test, which is the last of the 3, and the numbers go back down. So, and the polling companies say this is really important because you need to see where you can get to with the positives, and then as you drop back down, that's kind of your starting point. Then you get to that point. So, as these are broken down, you can see they have definitely, probably not, and definitely not, right? So there's 4 answers to would you support it. So just to get to the quick part, it's basically you combine the top 2 and the bottom 2, and you get to your yes and no. And for the CFD, when people just heard it, only 38% said they support it, far from the 2/3 that would be needed for March.
Yeah.
So after they heard about all the things that would be it would be supported and used for, that percentage jumps to 49%, which is closer, still not close enough. And then the informed test, which was really interesting on the March one, because it actually well, no, this one goes back down, but it drops back down to 43%. So after reviewing this with the polling company, talked to him on the phone today, he said there's no chance in heck, no matter what we do, that this property tax is going to pass in Morgan Hill in March or November. For a CFD, you would need the 2/3. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's out, and even if we went with a simple property tax that has to get to 50%, based on our numbers and where we're at on 43 to 48 to 38, and you average those and see where you're going to get, we're not there to get to 50%, and they don't recommend that we even try to keep moving forward towards any sort of property tax. So with that piece, October 23rd was being driven by the CFD, need to start that. And since we have no clear chance of getting that for March, or even likely November, we've just said, hey, let's give it a little bit of breathing time. This will let this group have more time to consider the results, and will allow us to come back on November 6th for the council for a discussion on part 2, which is sales tax, which is a little bit better, as we talked about.
Before you launch another,
Yeah.
probably not a question, how relevant is the sample size of the poll?
So,
Right, I mean, so where does it, statistically, how does that fall out as far as the sample size and the results that we're seeing?
so the sample size is what gets us to our margin of error. So the bigger sample size is, we can start pushing that 4% down to 3%, down to 2%. But the sample size, from everything we've heard and from, Gabi research, they did enough, the sample is enough to give us a good reading.
And I'm assuming there's a geographic disbursement as it relates to that sample size, or was it clustered in areas that maybe people would have a different opinion in one sector to another?
So we don't have all of those details quite yet. I can get that question.
It's just an interesting perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because sample size and relevance has a large to do with the end results and disbursement. Let's say, if you look at a heat map where population is setting, may also have some indicators of where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was supposed to be
Okay.
geographically based on the calls that were made, that people were targeted. And the exact results, I'm not sure if
I'm just trying to understand the methodology.
Yeah, so,
Professional pollsters, they
no, and the same.
I'm learning.
usually. Yeah, no,
And,
it's
no,
not an
no,
online poll.
yeah, and these are registered voters that they're polling, not just, any random person, right? So that's what we're working on. So the CFD and the property tax does not look likely for Morgan Hill. And then as the discussion went on, we wanted to test it because we were doing the polling, and we thought there's a different way of looking at it, because we have a good portion of residents in the city of Morgan Hill that would be happy if, not a lot of new people came in. So we thought if we framed it that way, that might be useful in seeing if it worked better. But overall, we've heard really that cities don't do well on property taxes. School districts tend to do a little better. I think you guys
For
have.
bonds, parcel taxes are tougher, bonds, school bonds are easy.
Which is kind of funny because bonds are really, you're paying property tax for the life of the bond.
I'm not justifying it.
It's just interesting, and it works with the state the same way, it's like, you're still getting taxed, but sometimes it's not, people don't see it, so.
Far away from me explaining who did.
Yeah. So you guys ready? Want to talk about sales tax? So here's the question for sales tax. For serve essential city services, including 911 emergency response time, neighborhood police patrol, crime prevention and investigation, fire prevention and protection services, and fixing potholes and maintaining city streets, shall Morgan Hills measure enacting a 1/4 cent sales tax, providing $2.5 million annually until repealed by voters with independent citizen oversight, and no funds for Sacramento be adopted. So, pretty straightforward. Question?
Very straightforward, but I'm looking at the total anticipated. What kind of local commercial entity would drive $2.5 million? Car dealers,
Everything.
truck dealers?
Everything. So it's everything that sales taxes
And
in the city.
what is our total sales tax take? I have it at home, but I can't remember.
It's roughly 4 times, because right now we get
Yeah.
1%,
Yeah.
so that's about 10 million.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's right around our, a little bit higher than
It's
our
about a third
recreation
of the general
revenues.
fund, which is 29.
That's discretionary, but yes.
Yeah.
So the taxes and property taxes are a little,
No, we can't go in there.
we can't go higher right now.
No.
Yeah.
And why does the county talk about 1% back?
The Faster Bay Area,
Yeah.
that's the multi-county, did get approval from the legislature that it's gonna be
They would
like 10 counties that proposes that, yeah.
We'll all pay in. and we're gonna
Oh, you're talking about the The county itself or the transportation?
Carl already knows.
That's
Supervisor.
County was talking about it, but not now.
The county put theirs part of it.
I think that's Faster Bay Area, that's the conglomerate of counties.
Somebody was talking about it yesterday, but I don't
Yeah.
know who it was.
Yeah, they're talking about another sales tax. So that's been discussed, and so they would get the state's approval from, it's however many counties are jumping in, it's probably a little easier to do that. So here's our results again. So these come out quite a bit better. They don't get us to 2/3 anywhere yet, but we're going to talk about that. So the yeses from the uninformed, that first test, are at just under 59%. Yes for March, and just about a little bit lower for November. And then after the interim piece, after they hear all the positive stuff, it goes to 65% and 66%, so almost close to that 2/3, almost there for the 2/3 for the interim. And then the informed, when they hear the not so nice things about it drops down to the 51% for March and just under 54% for November. But remember, that's the last thing on the informed is for the negatives. So when you look at all three of these together, well over 50%. And so in our quick conversations and conversations we've had in previous years, because we've done this before, the percentage is, when you combine them and add them together, they're well higher than the 50% needed for a general measure, which you could say is for, that can't guarantee it, that's going to be dedicated to public safety and potholes, which is, if you look by our general fund chart, it is 90% of our general fund anyways. We can get to the general measure and that could pass. And so our belief is if you went in November, there'd be a good shot at this passing a general tax. Passing in a 2/3 special tax in March, not likely. It'd be a tough sell. Not impossible. They didn't think it was out of reach, but it'd be a tough sell. You need a big non-city funded group leading not cities leading a charge or campaign for it to have any chance of it getting the 2/3. So that's where we really get with sales tax. And we'll talk about that a little more because there's actually some things we've been talking about really quickly that some other cities have done. But it gives the group some thoughts on, hey, there's a good opportunity, good open door opportunity for November for sure, for if there was an interest in doing a sales tax to help support the city. There's a really good opportunity for that. And we've heard that from the professional polling company too. If we asked this question in November and it was for a general sales tax, and we didn't do a whole lot more than provide information on what it was and have an okay chance of passing. If there was support for it, you have a really, really strong chance of passing. So just a couple things that when we talked about those positive and negative things we talked about, they were like kind of just pull the top 3 of the key things people took the biggest interest in, the positive and the negative. So the top 3 kind of areas people were most interested in were preserving 911 response times, fixing potholes and maintaining city streets, and then the third one was preserve fire protection and prevention services. So that gives us an idea, like, if the city went forward, what are the things you would really
The
push?
keywords that work.
These are the things that people responded really positively to. And then on the flip side, these are the top 3 critical statements that people said, hey, these are the things that want to make me not vote for this. So this first one was, if the measure passes, the sales tax in Morgan Hill will be at 9.25%, one of the highest in the county. So that's going to be one of the arguments against us. But these help inform a potential discussion down the road. But everyone else is at 9. So House is really 9.25 versus 9. We already pay enough taxes. The city should live within its means and instead focus on what's really at stake for Morgan Hill, maintaining character of our neighborhoods and community in the face of excessive growth. So growth, which likely is going to happen based on housing legislation, is a negative influence on this campaign if people, if there's an opposition campaign against it. And then if new development paid its fair share, we would not need this measure. As we know, we tried to help new development pay its fair share, and the state took away our ability to do that. So,
And we asked the voters how it would make the duties pay.
yeah. So those were the critical statements. So just kind of, just some thoughts. I just want to go through these and then just open it up for your guys' discussion on this in our kind of staff level discussions, which is now going to be, go to this group and then to the city council to discuss. Is a couple things. So what type of measure? We've already kind of talked through this. The property tax side, whether it's a CFD or parcel tax, not likely is something that's going to work out in our favor at this time. We could do a lot of engagement and explaining on how things work and poll again for November and see if there's a better opportunity. But at this time, it's not an easy win. Then there is the sales tax, which we think is a viable route, at least in November. So you guys may consider discussing that a little bit. Then potential, it's supposed to be just not the type, just if you want to do a ballot measure at all. And that could be something just intended to say, hey, yes, we want to do it. No, we want to do it. Or we're not sure yet. We need this process to keep going on longer. So we just wanted to make sure you guys know that we're not trying to pressure this group into making a recommendation to the council on November 6th. It's really up to you. You can say, hey, we're not ready to do that, so let's just slow down. Question?
Drop back a little bit, Kristen, when you talked about the polling organization telling you that this worked in November, this worked in March, this didn't, this did. Potential to do a ballot in a major presidential election year. Used to be you didn't try to touch that with a 10-foot pole because you got, squirrely stuff.
Yeah,
Did they think it was viable for us to try it?
Yeah, so if you look up here, the poll for November versus March right now,
Right.
you can see there's not much different. Actually, November looked better. I mean, it really depends. And I don't want to get into the politics, but which party,
Everybody block votes. They
Yeah.
tend to.
and which party is energized and which state you're in, that sort of thing versus the primary, that sort of thing. Yeah.
May I comment on that? Some of that, things that
Yeah, sure.
Yes, and also, the school district, we've been polling on potential bond issue. But usually the rule of thumb in Northern California, you get more Democrats coming out in November than in March. And usually the rule of thumb is they're more willing to pay taxes than Democrats typically. However, this next year, the guessing is quite a lot different. There's essentially not a presidential, there's no interesting Republican primaries in March
Right.
for California residents. There's a lot of interesting Democratic primaries going on in March, and with it sooner, California's impact on the national primary, presidential primary, is likely to be greater than it has been in the past. So most of the pollsters, odds makers, are betting on a more heavily Democratic voter turnout come March than what you're used to seeing in the old rules of thumb. And at the school district, when we did our polling, the March versus November numbers, and it's all based on how do you model likely voters, right? So that's where the art is in. But similar to this, the numbers came out surprisingly close. Where so the kind of all the old sort of, about what to do or not do rules of thumbs don't seem to apply, but who knows? You never know until the vote happens.
This is the first time in a while we're going to be on the primary schedule where California actually.
That's what I'm saying.
Different.
So in the Democratic presidential primary, by going to the whole region, California moved earlier, we're the biggest, most populated state in the country, what we say ought to have some impact. When you go late, generally the race is all but over by the time California. So I expect we will see is not related to the presidential election per se, but the timing is because you're trying to guess who's going to vote and how they like it.
Yeah, that's exactly, what we're gonna get to, in the, kind of the final March versus November. Just one more, the general versus special on the type of, measure you wanna do. I think the data is leading to telling us we might, even if we do a really good campaign, to get 2/3 vote for something is gonna be very difficult in Oregon. It's gonna be a big stretch. This conversation we might want to have. The March versus November, which you're just talking about, a couple other things. So competing ballot measures. So we talked about the school district planning for March potentially, right?
No decision's been made.
But
That's where
potentially
your
March.
meeting is.
The school district potentially be March, but we could have the big additional sales tax in November with the faster bay areas, what they're calling it, for transportation. And then you could have people being asked for, census sales tax plus the city's 0.25 in November. And then just the timing of, just to be totally upfront, the timing of waiting till November was brought up by the polling company is you're going another 6 months where you could have some financial issues, we won't say recession, but financial slowdown, and if that happens before November, that reduces potentially people's willingness to support a tax measure. So that's something that can be considered. So we said that fiscal urgency to make it happen, March could be a benefit for that. And the other thing that been talked about briefly, only because the city of Monterey is doing it right now, is they are declaring a fiscal emergency based on some changes that have happened in Monterey, and that allows them to put a general tax on a ballot in March. So then you could run a general tax on the ballot if there's a fiscal emergency, but there's several findings the city would have to make. And obviously, I'm not here prepared to say we made those findings, but there are some key considerations with the state housing legislation that's just come out and says we're going to lose $1 million a year. That was something that changed recently and could be part of those findings potentially. It would take a lot more, it will take more detailed discussion. Our finance group is working on that as well, and we'll have potential recommendations for the council on that down the road. But that could be an option, so I wanted to share that with this group as well, not knowing that we could make those findings. And but you guys, you all do understand some of the budget because you sat through these meetings with us for several days. That we have fiscal urgency. We're not sure if it's an emergency, but we have some urgency. So it's something that could be discussed, and that means you could run the sales tax in March. With as a general tax, you can still, say, hey, it's a general tax, and it's going to fund city services, and our priority for city services is public safety and potholes. You can still say that because that's what we've done for years and years, and it could go with a majority.
But it's interesting factually, city services, 72% over police. I mean, we'd like to add to this and spend it consistent with how we spend our money now, overhead down 3% or whatever.
Yeah.
That's facts.
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right, and that's what our city's done forever, as we prioritize public safety and those things. So we've done that.
And I think one of the things we'll hear when we hear from the fire and police is regarding the police, we're the lowest manned per capita police force in the county. So we're under one officer per 1,000, and you look at Los Altos and some of the other places, 1.45, 1.5, I think there's one at 1.6. And if in fact the people in our community are saying preserve 911 response time and police, then if we emphasize that, I think we'll have a better chance of showing people that, hey, we're behind the game already, and we need this extra money just to get somewhere we're close. I mean, our police force is excellent as far as I'm concerned, but they are stressed, you know, and they're working a lot of overtime and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are kind of
Definitely a
the,
way to come up with a compelling argument as relates to fiscal urgency, right? I mean, we have all the fundamentals we need to be able to produce that type of campaign. Hearing that you can create something based on Monterey.
Monterey just,
Yeah.
Monterey, they do their resolution on Tuesday. They asked for the approval to move forward to do the resolution. Santa Cruz did one last year.
So if we can meet that test, right, that limit test of what that would be required for the city to be able to fulfill that need, that could then really kind of launch the campaign that will go along with the compelling argument, right? And you got both of it, you can balance it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to give you this last brief thing, and then I'm going to be quiet. And if you guys are going to write anything on the tablet, I'll do that. But just a couple of next steps. So we do plan to take the polling results to the council on November 6th instead of the 23rd. So that's instead of next week, that's 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
No, 3 weeks. So we have time. Yeah. So November 6th will be the first meeting in November. So we would love, when we go there, to have representatives of this group attend. What that does do, though, is it gives us our October 26th morning date where we're talking about housing to maybe push a little bit of time for this discussion on to that date. Although housing is going to be a big discussion, a big item, but maybe we do hour and a half on housing and then an hour on this discussion, so we can get up to speed. But it gives you that opportunity to take what we've had tonight and people who aren't here, we can give them the information once I correct those 2 typos. And then we have that, a bit of that discussion before the council meeting as well, which would be helpful. Just a couple things that what Michelle has helped me with. So we would take the polling to the council on the 6th of November to get direction on where they want to go. And then the council would have to adopt a resolution for the election by December 4th. So that's the final decision to go forward, although I think they have a couple days where they can rescind that decision, but it probably doesn't work meeting-wise, right, Michelle?
So that's the March.
Yeah, for March.
Yeah, from our,
Yeah, if we put it, so the last day for council to adopt it is the 4th, it has to be in the RV by the 6th. And if something should change between the 4th and the 11th is the deadline for us to remove that measure from the ballot.
So we're on that tight time frame, but without the CFD being an option, it's given us a little bit of breathing room and kind of gives us one more meeting on the 26th to talk it through, or you all in a meeting before making any sort of recommendations. And with that, I will be quiet. I'll put that back up and let you guys, if you have thoughts or more questions or discussion.
So I guess one question is just, how long would it take the city staff to determine if there was a fiscal emergency?
So, I mean, so city manager's not here, finance director's not here, but I spent most of the day working with our finance director on this discussion and in reviewing it. It seems like each city can make that decision for themselves, but it's not a litmus test likely, at least the way I read it. It's not a litmus test that the state's going to come down and say you have a physical emergency or trying to do your business, but it puts some pressure on us. We're saying we're having a fiscal emergency. We're supposed to break ground on a new playground that's going to cost us operational dollars. Should we be doing that if we're in the middle of a fiscal emergency and we know where we're going? We just lost most of our park maintenance fund to SB 330. But, you know, those are things we have to take into account. Can we add, do these other things that we want to do? You know, when people say, hey, we need more money to support our events, or we need more of this, can we, once we've declared this fiscal emergency, it's not likely we're going to, our council's going to have the freedom to do those things. So I think a lot of that is looking internally, and a lot of discussions we have, which we have to do anyway because of SB 330. So I think it's a possibility.
I I think that's a good question. I mean, it would be good to know the consequences if we go that route, right? So will be any holdbacks to some existing plans that are in place that could be more problematic as far as.
Well, yeah, what would those be?
Right, right,
And is that a smart thing to do anyway?
right, exactly.
Yeah, and given the loss of our RDCS and the other issues, you know, as much as I love parks and all it,
Right.
you know, we look at buildings, you know, what are the annual operating expenses? If even if everything that you want to get done gets done, we still don't know how to pay for our police and our parks, and that's not bad and very, I mean, I imagine, you know, that park is a more expensive thing to maintain than just a grass field.
Yeah, we also do, okay, here go off of my economic development. We think we'll get a huge number of people from the county driving through every day and
Yeah.
stopping at Followup and finding gas at Safeway that might help us on the economic development end, because it's gonna be such a big future as well. So there may be some payback on that investment, even though we aren't targeting that helps us. So we could very well, as a city,
I can put a number on that.
we don't, as you know, that's hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
But we may say, hey, we're gonna maintain this park and this park, but we're not gonna maintain these parks anymore, because they're not used at the level of this new one we're building, which could be sad to do, but it might be a more strategic thing from an economic perspective if you're supporting.
Whatever neighborhood happens to be using the park, we want to be fun.
That's right.
Right, it's very difficult.
Very, you know, so for whoever lives around, you know, Park X, Y, Z, and that's where they go, and suddenly, oh, that's on the they'll take care of it anymore list, because it's 5 miles away, and it's beautiful, and we're spending our money, that's upset.
Yeah, absolutely it
It's
is.
on decommission, that's right, so. Right there.
Yeah, it is.
I would remind or inform of the last time we tried this. It was back in 2010, 11, somewhere in there. And the polling that he just showed you on that was very, very similar back then. It was very, very close to the 50% we needed, just under. And then when the vote came in, it was 36%. So it dropped from, high 40s, and we did all the education nobody came to, and the vote was 36%. So my reaction to what Chris just showed us is we gotta wait till November, because we're gonna need all that time to really, really educate the public and find ways of finding it. So I know it might be a risk of, financial downfall or something, but we need that time.
Well, I think, and when we started this the very first day, I wondered about the efficacy of going for November as opposed to March, and I thought during March might be the other thing. But given what Chris is telling us here, okay, and now that we know what the implications of the 330 are going to be, because that whole first 2 pages is safe routes to school, school this, school that, school the other thing, and then it's parks and recreation. And there's a certain amount of dollars that the developers have given into that fund over the years. We're not going to have that anymore. But bottom line is, we have a lot of private parks in Morgan Hill, many of which have signs up that are only for the people who live there, okay? So we'll have to watch that we don't take parks away from lower income areas.
Agreed, yeah.
And that might be a critical need, to look at something like that. I don't know, what are the specific attributes that they cited, Chris, that were acceptable over maybe 5 communities doing this emergency kind of a thing over the past couple of years?
I probably looked at 5,
Okay.
including, some of them are different. So Santa Cruz just said, hey, pensions are going up, and we are gonna be losing, so we have that too. Costs are associated with that, there's costs coming up, we're not gonna be able to provide these services, we're making this. Moraga, a couple years ago, had some giant sinkhole that tapped their whole general fund that they had to repair.
A literal sinkhole?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not pensions.
Absolutely. they declared a fiscal emergency,
Yeah.
and then they rescinded it, and it was not, they got onto some of the conservative talk shows, and they basically, people started saying, hey, Moraga, their average income there is $150,000 a year, the town's declaring a fiscal emergency, and they got hit with that, and they ended up changing some leadership, and it looked like rescinding that fiscal emergency, and that measure failed. And then, Monterey's going forward, you'll see what happens there, and then other cities have done it through the past, and it's just been based on their own financial situation. I didn't see a real big method to the madness, but I think one of the things we could commit to come back on the 24th is really describing that in more detail. We just kind of wanted to open the door tonight, and I can have the professionals from the finance department go in and tell you what we're thinking.
One of the things I just thought about is, the meeting last night was very well organized from the people that were there. That committee is really working hard to make everybody, the community, not just people that live in that area, but the whole community aware of what's taking place with the town of Crowthorne. So if we could get organizations like that to understand what we're looking at as from a city standpoint and get them involved, then they can help us get that word out and maybe, sway the vote to where we get some of this passed.
What's the name of that organization, Ryan?
Pardon?
What's the name of that?
It's, was it, I don't know, Rick knows probably.
Morgan Hill Residents for Responsible Growth.
Responsible
Yes,
growth,
that's
that's
it.
it, yeah, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But, get a few organizations like that that are organized and have people behind them, make them understand where we are from a city standpoint, from a fiscal responsibility standpoint. The city's been very fiscally responsible. It's just the fact that the money isn't coming in, and we lost a lot of avenues for the money over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and every one of the cities that I saw it explained exactly that. We tried to be fiscally responsible, but our graph is going like this
Yeah.
because our expenses keep going up and our revenues aren't. And sometimes there's changes that outside factors that have impacted them, like a sinkhole or pension costs, like we can say. So I think that's good. And I would say, 2 years ago when we did TOT, from the city staff perspective, we didn't do a ton, but we did try and reach out to the groups that we could, like the HOAs, our commissions, and we just said, hey, this is what the TOT is going to be used for. And we talked through the cannabis tax, and Maureen and myself and a few others went to just as many of those meetings. We're not campaigning, we're just saying, this is
Information.
information. And the city would, and our team would be able to do that again and just provide information. We can't campaign, that's what other groups are meeting for, but we could do that.
So I have a question, concern. Because of SB 330, we're losing $1.1 billion.
Probably more, but yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah,
But the sales tax, we're gaining, what did we get,
2.5.
So we're really breaking even on keeping us just literally above water.
Right.
We haven't accomplished anything that we've talked about in this Engage Morgan Hill. So I'm concerned with this focus that we're going to lose track of the other things that we need to do, this constant.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're this $1.1+ million annually, sales tax is 2 something.
so yeah.
5, so it's double.
So we may not choose to fund all those things at the same level, but so say we did fund all those things that we're losing, you still have that chance. If you funded all the things you're losing, you have that additional 1.4, and that could get our police force up to snuff, right? And so it can do something, or it can get half of our police and a quarter of our fire. And then, that's why we ran the polling for the CFD, because we thought there was a way to get us to a much higher amount to get us where we need. But we can't be heartbroken if we don't get there, because that's not our only avenue. I mean, there's opportunities for different revenue measures. I talked about at the last thing, this little park maintenance thing at 0.7, we may have that figured out by switching our park dedication ordinance, so that might come off. And then we're down a little bit. And And then the next thing that happens is, we look at, how we're funding some of our park and street maintenance includes like some of the stormwater stuff we're doing where the state's given some different provisions on how you can charge different things. We just found out that, our water fund can support stormwater, requirements that are ahead of us at a much greater level based on a state ruling that says you're protecting your groundwater. So there's little things to knock away at it. So we have those little things. And then our friend Edith just walked in a minute ago, and we talked about a couple times ago, those hotels that are on the ballot that are being referended, if those go through, that could be $800,000.
We know their growth too.
Yeah.
So Trammell Crow last night said 700,000 a year.
Yeah.
Now, if that goes through, maybe not as a distribution center, but it's the right kind of development.
So we can't give up.
No.
We can't just say the 2.5 is not enough, but that's all we can get from the tax measure at this time. I think we need to be clear on that campaign that it doesn't get us to all our need, but it helps us. And
I think to Jennifer's point, and that's very insightful, because individuals are going to do a quick math, right? And they're going to come to the same conclusion Jennifer just did in the last 5 minutes. So I think the point is we've got to be able to control the narrative. We've got to make sure that we really are directing the funds. They're going to have the greatest impact to the majority of the population who's going to vote. So we're going to have to really target that. So I think going back to Steve's comment, we need the time to develop that campaign, to build a coalition around that. Because if we're washy at all, it's going to come down to just numbers, and everyone's going to have a different set of numbers in their head, and it's just going to dilute the process. So
I was originally in favor of moving ahead with the March.
right.
Because I thought there's going to be too many things on the ballot from the county, the state, other cities around the area from the November thing. But the other thing I think that we need to really emphasize with people is how we're eating into the reserves of the budget. You look at that and it's scary.
Yes.
We're already getting below the 15% level, I think, where we're supposed to be
Right.
in 3 or 4 years, and it doesn't seem like it's going to end right now. There's no end in sight. So people have to understand that hey guys, we, as a city, if you want these services, we've got to find a way to pay for them.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think to be saleable, it has to be a comprehensive plan.
Yes.
So voters, if you approve this, that will help with this piece of it. City staff, by being smarter about, certain ways you operate things, like here, we can find some money. Dealing with the changes from the state, we're gonna, part of our adaptation, that's where we're gonna find this. Economic development, we need, X jobs, Y hotel rooms, and Z square feet of this kind of, there has to be a whole plan. So voters, we're asking you to pay a little more to do this piece, recognizing we can't get where we need to go just on your backs.
Right, and along with that comprehensive plan, they're going to expect not only where we can find buckets of money, a variety of money, the right kind of development, they also might expect, okay, city, what do you give them? What can you cut?
And what earlier,
And we can show that.
several
And what are we working on to find other sources for
Right.
it?
Exactly.
Chris just
Yeah, so it's kind of holistic.
we gotta understand that we're doing everything in every area that we possibly can.
and to Rick's point, we haven't really had any ad hoc group like this gathered together, with city staff or leadership to kind of do ask some of the challenging questions. Are there ways to do what you do different? You're doing a great job, but I know certainly in my world, an outsider, knowledgeable, thoughtful, helpful, not just screaming. Come to the table and start asking questions like, gee, I haven't really thought about that because this is just how we've done it for 5 years. So there might be, an efficiency commission or something that can you put a number on that might be found.
And we all
That
see
way.
it through different sets of lenses.
Right.
You come at it one way, I come at it from a neighborhood point of view where my neighbors, it's first responders, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of retired people in my neighborhood. They know if somebody falls, they've got to be in an ambulance in X numbers of minutes and on their way to the hospital. And so those are the things that concern me, that concerns me, because I've been there. that's important, but the bottom line is, I think, what Steve said, we got a whole lot of figures when we started this a couple months ago, 3 months ago, and I think we have to take all of that information, take the areas of the budget that are going to get into the biggest trouble the quickest, and see where we have to plug the fire hydrant, and where we can make up the extra differences, and try to put the whole thing together, because I agree, it has to be comprehensive. If we try to go to the taxpayers with anything less, we're taxed to death.
So we have a $7-8.5 million problem. Please give us 2.5. And we're working on the rest. Isn't a very compelling pitch. I know, but and I'll say when voting and decision making is more emotional than rational.
Right.
And so when we talk about anything going to the voters, think about what's the really ultra simplified, and when it talks about, dear voter, please give me more money, the real question isn't, do I want to give you more money? No. I don't want to pay more taxes for anything. Is it necessary, and do I trust that you're going to use it for that, for what we
What
care
am I
about?
going to get out of it?
So,
And for me, I get out of it with knowing that an ambulance can come to my house in the amount of time I need it, or to my neighbors.
Yeah. You're more rational than most.
I've had to do that.
The other thing on part of the conversation is the social determinants, you're right, voting's emotional based.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to understand the consequences at a social level, based on our population, make sure that we're hitting those marks. Because that's how we control the narrative, right? Because it comes down to someone says, well, we're going to have to go to the poll, and they're going to have to vote. So along with the math, and along with the comprehensive strategic plan, we need to understand the social impact across our community and make sure that we get those triggers. This is part of the narrative.
There's only a handful of us going in there with an Excel spreadsheet.
And I'm guessing you're one of them, right?
There's things,
I'm just like anybody else.
so there's things that are outside our control, like cost of PERS, okay? That's gonna go up probably every year. It's totally underfunded. And it's been going up every year for the last 4 or 5 years. And so that's something the city can't control, we can't control, it adds to the cost.
but we've done better than most,
We have.
Brian, because we've shared some of the
We
increased
shared them with
costs
the
with our
employees.
employees,
I know.
and we have put some money away. And that's a story a lot of cities can't tell, that we've done. So
But it's still gonna,
But it's still, but you're still right, we're gonna be dealing with that for a little while. I think, just to hit on the point you guys were both making on the getting into the details and then the social piece, because I think if you read this question and you're sitting in there writing on this question, you're not gonna get into the details reading this question. What we're trying to do through this process is get you guys into the details, and we're gonna get farther into the details really soon, with kind of the budget piece Maureen's talking about, and some of the things we do, but we can't there's no way to get, the whole voting population into the details, and that's, I think, part of the key to having this group get into the details on the areas where you can speak to it, because there just has to be that trust factor like you've mentioned.
yeah.
So, is there, I think the group is, kind of going back and forth, but obviously I don't know that, I think we have the 24th to spend a little, 24th, 26th. 26th, to spend a little bit of time on this and get the greater group. And so I heard a couple things that it seemed like you guys might want more detail on, so we can kind of prepare that over the next couple of weeks to say, okay, what happened in 2010? What were our numbers there? So I think we can do that, right? We can pull some of that data and share that. We can there was another good one that someone had said. What are the things you might want? And the fiscal emergency. What does that mean? So we'll bring that back and say, here's some examples the other cities have used, so we can have that detail.
I think there's a little bit of what if, like economic development. What if
Yeah.
general code does come up with an acceptable, and we get $700,000 a year. And what if the Cochran Butterfield development does well, and the hotels come? Okay, and what are you
So all of
talking
a
about?
sudden, you're inching closer
Yeah.
to that 7 minutes.
Right. And that's what we can see today.
But,
What can't we see 5 years from now?
but they need to the public needs to understand that without the sales tax increase, we will be more, it'll be a much slower process and not even a guaranteed process. Because that's why you said what if.
Right.
With the sales tax,
Sure.
at least we have recovered the loss that the new housing situation has put us in. So we're not sinking lower. We still have our head above water, and we could conceivably fix part of the first responder ratio. And then if all these what ifs come in, then we're starting to look at other things. I mean, I think what I'm saying is that we have to prioritize for the public. And so that they can see that it's not just a sales tax, it's not just money going into the general fund.
Exactly.
Right.
It's specific,
things.
and it's the first priority. And the second priority is this, and the third and the fourth is that, so we can take some of the emotion out of it and eliminate the Excel sheet.
And unintended consequences, you know, SB 330, I could see puts and takes there, right? We're gonna have more development, so we'll have more property tax, but we'll have more need for police. You know, so there's,
Infrastructure and all
Right,
sorts of things.
right.
And generally,
Is that generally a negative?
generally speaking, residential development tends to be a cost center over time.
Right, yeah, right.
But then, retail development, you still back there, David? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we keep hearing from developers, well, because you have growth control, we don't want to come to more than that.
Well, that's what we know. So our population is.
So, right, so there's all the factors in our system, the differential equations, they're all moving
Right.
around. If I think about this as a business plan problem, like the economic development, I'd say, okay, what are all my universe of potentials, and what might they do for me, and how confident I am? I'm 80% confident this is going to happen and bring in $100,000 a year. I'm 10% confident this $1 million. So that's, you know, in a business play, you know, what are all your customer opportunities? What are the
Okay,
likely?
wait for the revenue before you spend, or do you spend it?
No, well, yeah, but, yeah, I mean, you understand, this, you live this every day. But then you have to come up with some kind of, well, okay, what is our revenue plan for this period of time based on, you know, again, by analogy, sort of existing things are kind of like backlog. Whereas, you know, property tax is pretty predictable, sales tax is moderately predictable, depending on economic factors. The hard to predict stuff is the new, you know, when might this new thing happen? So then you put probabilities on it. I think there's two pieces. For this group and the larger engaged group, we need to get really knowledgeable and be bought into, okay, the overall picture.
Right.
Then the voter education thing, you're never going to get the average voter up to that level of education. So there has to be a simplification.
Right.
Okay, there's a lot going, you know, when you're talking to your neighborhood association or somebody grabs me by the collar and I'm like, John, why do you think this is a good idea? So there's a lot going on. Is this happening, this happening, this happening? What we need from you is X. It's all part of a bigger plan. Without explaining it, you start getting into, you know, PERS rates, but the governor is it's just knocking right out. So this, the engaged group, we really need to understand this stuff. And then the public education is, there's a much more simplified thing. And when you run into that person that wants to, like, come look at my spreadsheet, or our spreadsheet.
Or maybe a simplified
Yeah.
marketing piece that has two pie charts on it. You know, shortfall and where we think we're going to get it, which includes, you know,
But
economic development.
to Jennifer's point, for me, the whole project is only compelling if we have some picture of how do we get where we need to go.
Yeah.
Not, well, you know, there's this, and this is why I always brag on Carl Bernardino when he goes out for sales tax measures for transportation. It's always, transportation's a nightmare. It's this long for this, it's this long for this, it's this long for this, so give me another half cent. And I said, okay, so if we give you that half cent, how does it change all those metrics you just told us? Well, it's a down payment. Right, but there's never a
That's
conversation. Yeah,
But I like your statement of your part is X. And Citizens' part is X. And this is what the rest of the city and organizations are doing, but we need you as the citizenship to take ownership of X, which would be the sales tax.
or whatever.
Or
Presumably.
presumably.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Right, yeah.
So that they can feel like, okay, you're not just taxing me, I'm part of the solution. That gets to the emotional play of it, but then we can add the other things, okay, we know we can knock out parking lot maintenance, I'm just taking stuff off.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody I said that.
It's on recording.
Too late. Well,
Yeah, I was thinking about that one.
I just know I'm on the record for saying the
That's
first thing you
Jennifer
choose was police and
T.A.T..
city streets.
Her phone number.
She'll be here all week. So, I mean, it's just, I think we have a real chance if we can compartmentalize like that and say that the city is looking for ways to cut in areas and they're exploring avenues that they have not explored before on, like you pointed out, things that you just learned about that help with finding new monies or a different way of using monies and all of those things. So that becomes the whole package. And then Stephen is right, we need to look into it.
And more radical things could be considered. An example, like, say, not every city owns its own water company.
Now, you're right on that.
I know, that's not gonna work here. Maybe the city owning a water company is terrific, but has that been analyzed from a financial
I'll
point of
give you the quick example. If San Jose Water Company is privately owned, has more expenses and pays more bills, they get to make more money because they're only allowed to make 10% and governed by the C.
Yeah.
The C.
And they just bought a
PCF.
Connecticut water company.
So you could look at it back and forth, but our real option is to go to a private water company. So it's real easy to look at the benefits of public versus private, no matter how good or bad we're doing.
And I don't need, so to that, basically, private water companies, San Jose Water buying it out would be much higher water rates for the people in Morgan Hill. I wouldn't like that, but it would mean less political pressure on the city council to over there.
But it would also mean that we would have to cut, 20% out of our city manager and 20% of the resources department and 20% of that function, which that function goes away. So you gotta think about those things. So it's a big picture.
Yeah.
So
Or
there's some.
maybe here's the benefit you're getting out of having a public water company. You flip it around. So
absolutely.
We've looked at it, we've analyzed it.
So I think you're on total right track. So as we go forward, we were going to go through this budget exercise, focus on the general fund, and really get into the details of those areas. But if you want to choose a couple other areas, and have a couple people get into it, we're open. I mean, I got a good one to throw you guys for this December. Anyone who wants to work on a park maintenance issue we have for our landscape assessment district, where the bids came in double what they were previously because of where we live. What's our best way to?
You said volunteers plant the trees last week.
Volunteers,
Yeah.
What's that landscaping?
What's the landscaping you're talking about?
It's a small, we have 5 groups, so we have landscapers that come and maintain our different sections like we talked about. It's our landscape assessment district primarily, so it's not even in the general fund. But we've typically contracted all that maintenance out because it was cheaper, but the costs are going up exponentially on contract service for landscape, and their service is not good, but because of the area we live in, it's just a competition for those pieces, and everyone's pushing that prevailing wage is up to here, and then it really doesn't matter because competitive wage is here now, so they have to bid at this level, but we don't have the ability to fund that. It's just, so then we go back and look internally at doing it ourselves, but figuring we can only do it at a really poor job.
Using our own lawnmowers, are you saying?
Yeah.
Those contract costs that you contract for, some of those are even gonna go higher with the new law that takes effect in January. But they gotta be an employee not a contractor anymore.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's, the costs are gonna go up dramatically.
Integration, crackdown on all these different moving parts.
So we're just saying we deal with that stuff on a day-to-day basis, and it's even a little more complicated than, say, dealing with it for your own company, because we have to get approval from the state and make sure they're registered with the Department of Industrial Relations, and 10 more things that anyone else has to do on the private side. It's like, so, but we're open to opening those books up and, having people jump in with us and joining these conversations. Might be helpful.
Because I just have a couple of thoughts. Is it possible for you or the team to take a look at a little bit more discovery before we meet on that Saturday?
Yeah.
For the cities that went through the fiscal emergency? Because, changing someone's mindset, urgency is always one of the prime motivators to be able to change someone's mindset if it's a good driving force. But I'd love to understand from the cities that went through that process, how did it look post the event? I mean, was it sustainable? What does that look like? Did it actually achieve the results? Is there any way to do some discovery with a few of those?
Oh, yeah.
That would be good to know, right?
Yeah. So this is my follow-up and
Yeah,
get to you guys before the 26
Yeah.
list. So I think that's a huge one.
And as a part of that, though, if we can take a look, I'm just reading the polling questions, and I don't know if we can, if this even makes any sense, but it says, until repealed by voters. We have to answer that question as a part of our discussion somewhere down the line. So I just need to get a better feel for really what that means. I mean, are we looking at a sales tax that's going to be forever, or repealed by voters? And we're going to have to answer that response, so we need to figure out what that means and how to deal with that question. And then, of course, the other thing is, what is this independent citizens oversight group? That provides the authenticity, the funds that are directed for designated areas, we're going to have some oversight. What does that look like? So, as you talk to those other cities, how did they put that together? Where did it go? Was it successful? What did they learn? What were the lessons?
Yeah, and to be clear, all the cities that did a fiscal emergency didn't necessarily have an oversight committee, but lots of people who do any taxes do oversight committees. School district has one for the current bond, right, John?
I think the bond is required.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's one of the bullet points as far as the major issues of contention. So we have to answer. We have to be able to answer that question to a point where it makes sense. And
I believe with these, you have a choice. You either put an expiration date in, say for like 10 years, or you say until the voters. You have to do one year.
You don't have to do either. But so it polls better if you say repealed. It polls even better if you say 10 years. And it polls better if you have citizen oversight long term. You have a better chance of it
I'm
passing.
going to get a county-wide one, initially we put it as 10 year or whatever, and then often come time, when you're 8 or 9, go back and say, do you agree with continuing
Right.
this? And the success rate of continuation measures is very high.
Yeah, and we can have answers on that too as we dig into the polling numbers, because we've done some questions that are a little more detailed to say, hey, if there's an 8-year term, how much does it move the needle?
Right.
And is it statistically valid? If it doesn't move the needle,
It moves it to 1%, you have a 4% confidence.
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So we can look into that, for sure. So, and maybe, I know people look like they're looking at the clock and a little tired. Any other stuff you want us to kind of get to you before potentially the 24th? And I'm not sure how much time we'll have on the 24th because I'm not in charge of that day, and Maureen might bust me because she's out of the area and not around. But for
We
cities,
extended a half an hour, we can keep extending.
right?
Okay, moderator with research on there.
Plus, I think Leslie is supposed to be presenting for housing, and she's acting city manager, so if I go tell her right now, she might fire me.
Doesn't seem good, right? She wouldn't want me to work.
But is there any other big items that we want to kind of like do to get some information on before the next meeting?
No, I have a question.
Okay.
Chris, all the years I did planning commission, and Chelsea's going to get me a copy of the RDCS form because I want to look at it. We had, under the category of safe walkways to schools, okay, we had year after year after year, funding went into that, but was not used. And so at some points, like we got them to do the sidewalks across the highway on Main Avenue going to Live Oak.
Oh, cool.
Okay. We got them to do the sidewalks at Tilton coming out for the kids to go across to Sobrato, okay? But those funds were basically accrued. They were not all used, and they were accrued. Are we going to lose those, access to those funds, or can we still spend them?
So we have those funds in a fund balance. They're not gonna last very long. We do all that $150,000 a year, most of that. Our sidewalk repairs all happen in our schools, and we've used that funding for the last, I don't know, decade or so to fund that program.
Right.
We've also funded the bike routes, those lighted crosswalks that go in are funded that way. We have a big project to do the frontage at Britain. Saying we don't want to move forward, we kind of committed to the school district to do that. But we don't have a big enough fund balance to live off for a very long time.
So we'll use it up.
We'll use it up really
We
fast.
don't lose anything.
Yeah, we'll use it up. We don't lose anything. So like those fund balances, like what we see up here when I talk about those storm drain repairs, and I talk about that open space maintenance and the park maintenance, those all have fund balances. So, hey, January 1, when RDCS is gone, we're not losing all that money. We actually have a bunch of development agreements with people that are committed to pay those things. So we'll probably get a little bit more of that money for the next year and a half, and then it'll stop for 5 years or plus. But there's not enough money in there. Those balances aren't big enough to last. We don't keep $10 million.
I think the crux of your question is, does SB 330 take away the existing category?
It doesn't restrict us moving it from one category to another, because it was, quote, under what is it, the green, whatever it is, the state's thing, said that we had to do that, and it was in this accrued, and Scott used to keep track of it.
Yeah, we keep track of it still. In our CIP, you look in the back of the book, it tells you the number in there. We keep track of it good. And Scott still spends it.
And we can use it for other things.
All that RDCS money in those areas, it's kind of tricky to use it for other things. You want it to have the nexus of what we collected the money for. It isn't like an impact fee where it has to be exact, but it would be unlikely. But to that extent, we've been using all those park maintenance dollars, all the park contributions to fund park maintenance directly. So if we move that away, then we're going to stop doing park maintenance earlier. So we got a couple $1 million in the bank. So we could continue park maintenance at the current level for 3 years before we have to offset with more general fund or say we're going to stop doing park maintenance. So it's not a crash at the very minute January 1 comes for this 1.3 million. It's probably the funding will last and be expended over 2 to 3 years and then be gone. Would be my estimate. And it's different by fund.
Okay. We fought for a long time to get parks.
I know.
You know that.
Well, and I just say, hey, everyone says let's just stop maintaining our parks. The parks is where the people who don't have money to do anything else go. And we see that at County Park and Community Park. And when we build this great, give me my speech because no one else is here. When we build this inclusive playground, we'll bring people from all the places. It'll support economic development, but it also is going to be right next to our biggest low-income apartment complex in town, Park Place, and it'll be a place that all those kids from across town will be able to walk there, and it's something to be proud of. So we want to keep that park going.
If you've ever played SimCity, if you let your park your city goes down.
All right. Now we're turning this thing around.
And that's on video.
But to everyone's point, there's a lot of things we can commit to try and do besides just the $2.5 million. So the fiscal strategy you're talking about developing makes a lot of sense.
Well, and if we set it up with a leverage situation, which has been talked about, I think people will see that we're working toward getting the biggest, best bang for the buck. There's an old adage. But I think we can show that. I think we can show where we need to be, how we can get there, and that people will then buy in. Maybe not all of them, but people will then buy in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think we're good with this. I want to throw up the future dates one more time, so that's on everyone's.
10/26, right?
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. So Saturday 26th for Engage. That's not this Saturday, but the next Saturday, right?
A week from Saturday.
And then we got about 3 weeks from tonight for the city council meeting on November 6th. it'd be great to have the whole group there in attendance to have the discussion on it.
Yep.
So is there kind of a consensus amongst those of us here that any kind of a measure for more money from the voters, it makes sense to look at November and to set aside March?
I think it's going to take that long to get it together.
I think that's what we said, and I'm just trying to make kind of explicit what I think
But I think there are a couple of people who mentioned, maybe we want to look at what it means to cause the fiscal emergency.
Right.
So
Yes.
I would
We should
say,
understand.
yeah,
Right.
and then don't maybe finish closing the door on your recommendation on the 26th. And then we'll get you some data before that to look at and help inform you of the potential recommendations. And then we can give you some better staff analysis too, after we've kind of been polling for more than 20 hours.
when I think of, forever Mayor Tate, right, you get your title even if you lose the job. The last time this was attempted, the reality coming in 17 percentage points down from the polling, that's a great cause. That's way outside the margin of error. Maybe we hired different pollsters this time. But really, that was information I wasn't aware of. And that's
Well, the other political factor that played into that is that we did not have total council.
Okay. And the other, if there's going to be any kind of a tax measure, the police and fire unions and your Clefs and whoever else, they better be full-throatedly out in support of it.
We will.
It's a matter of simple self-interest since they get.
We don't think Clef's any problem, right?
But,
Nor does BOA.
but again, to inform this, what I learned in my school district, when voters were asked, how do you like teachers? 2/3 of them, we love teachers. How do you like district staff? How do you like your elected school board? 70% don't like us. I don't know why. Well, they always don't like the other one, right?
Yeah.
It's like Congress. Everybody hates Congress, but they all vote for presenting them. But anyway, so I think just by now, in this case, from what the city is responsible for, police and fire is very salient.
Yes.
I mean, we haven't done anything, right? I don't think we.
So,
Yeah.
so if there's something to be sold, police and fire would have to be front and center.
Well, we're going to hear a lot about that in the next meeting or two.
Maybe they can say, "Oh, boot up the corner and collect."
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, the telepathy is strong.
That's a pretty big move.
It's 100% right by mail. It's like, I'm dropping down here. Go ahead,
Maybe a more thought as you walk out,
I
like,
just
put on
never mind, but I got early
my Marine hat and think to the 26th, maybe another longer meeting to
Yeah.
11:30
Yes,
noonish.
11:30 to 9 and 10, now we're going to 11:30.
11:30 and probably.
Yeah.
And 9 and
Plan on that.
And we almost got to